The late 18th century was a time of immense upheaval. Across the English Channel, France was in turmoil. The French Revolution had torn society apart. Kings and nobles across Europe watched in fear. The foundations of power were shaking. Ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity were born. These concepts thrilled many but terrified rulers. Monarchies resisted these new ideas. Europe was dividing into opposing camps. France struggled internally, leading to instability. The Reign of Terror showed the dangers. France was at war with its neighbors. Revolutionary armies fought fiercely. France needed a strong hand to guide it. Old empires were creaking under pressure. People yearned for stability and change. The revolution unleashed powerful energies. Europe was on the brink of great wars. A new figure was about to step onto this stage. His name would soon echo across the world. Napoleon Bonaparte was not born to royalty. He came from the island of Corsica. He showed early promise in military school, ambitious, driven, and incredibly smart. The revolution gave him his chance as many aristocratic officers fled France. This created openings for talented young men, and Napoleon seized his opportunities. His early military campaigns were stunning, leading his troops to victory in Italy. He outmaneuvered experienced Austrian generals, and his soldiers adored him. Though his Egyptian expedition was not a total success, it boosted his fame. Napoleon became a hero back in France, seen as a savior. France was still politically unstable, with the weak and corrupt Directory in power. People longed for strong leadership, and in 1799 Napoleon saw his moment. He returned from Egypt to a hero's welcome and launched a coup d'etat. Becoming first consul of France, he gained immense political power. Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds. He was a brilliant administrator. He reformed French laws and institutions, with the Napoleonic Code still influential today. In 1804, he crowned himself emperor, no longer a servant of the Republic. He built a powerful, centralized state ready to project its power across Europe. Napoleon was a true military genius, understanding warfare like few others. His Grande Army was a formidable force with loyal, well-trained and fast-moving soldiers. He developed innovative tactics using speed and surprise to crush enemies. The Battle of Austerlitz in 1805 was his masterpiece, often called the Battle of the Three Emperors. Napoleon faced the armies of Russia and Austria, tricking them into attacking his strong position. He launched a devastating counterattack, shattering the Allied army. Austerlitz cemented Napoleon's reputation, and he seemed invincible on the battlefield. Victory followed victory for the French emperor as he faced the mighty Prussian army in 1806. At the twin battles of Jena and Auerstedt, the Prussians were utterly defeated. Napoleon marched into Berlin in triumph and moved to create the Continental System. This was an attempt to blockade Britain and cripple its economy by stopping trade. Napoleon's power reached its zenith, controlling vast swathes of the continent. He placed his relatives on thrones, creating new kingdoms and states. Old empires were humbled or dismantled with the Holy Roman Empire dissolved, but his dominance sowed seeds of resentment as conquered peoples yearned for freedom. Britain remained Napoleon's most stubborn enemy, protected by the powerful Royal Navy. Admiral Nelson's victory at Trafalgar in 1805 shattered Napoleon's hopes of invading Britain. Britain used its wealth to fund alliances and support resistance movements across Europe. The other great powers of Europe were alarmed, forming a series of coalitions against Napoleon. These alliances aimed to curb French power and restore balance in Europe. Napoleon often defeated them one by one, using diplomacy skillfully. He made peace with one enemy, then turned his focus to another. His marriage to Marie-Louise of Austria linked him to an ancient royal house, but these arrangements were often temporary, based on convenience rather than trust. The Peninsular War in Spain and Portugal became a bleeding wound for Napoleon. His troops faced fierce guerrilla warfare, with British forces led by Wellington supporting them. This war drained French resources and manpower, showing that Napoleon's armies could be beaten. Relations between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I soured, with mistrust growing between the two emperors. Napoleon decided on a massive show of force, invading Russia to bring the Tsar to heel. In the summer of 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia with the largest army Europe had ever seen. The Russians adopted a scorched earth policy. retreating and burning crops and villages. This denied Napoleon's army vital supplies, stretching French lines across vast distances. The Battle of Borodino was incredibly bloody, with both sides suffering terrible casualties. Napoleon occupied Moscow but found a largely deserted city, soon engulfed in mysterious fires. The Tsar refused to negotiate peace, and winter approached fast. The retreat from Moscow was a catastrophe, with the Russian winter arriving early and fiercely. French soldiers lacked food and warm clothing, harassed by Russian Cossacks. Thousands died from cold, starvation and disease, as the once mighty Grande Armée disintegrated. Only a tiny fraction made it back, shattering Napoleon's aura of invincibility. The Napoleonic Wars engulfed almost all of Europe, with unprecedented scale of conflict. Millions of soldiers were mobilized, and millions died or were grievously wounded. Civilians suffered immensely, as their lands became battlefields and their homes were destroyed. Famine and disease often followed the armies, with the human cost staggering. Economies across Europe were severely disrupted, with resources constantly diverted to war efforts. Taxes rose to pay for huge armies, and inflation became a serious problem. Yet, amidst the destruction, new ideas took root, spreading revolutionary ideals. French soldiers carried ideas of liberty and reform, sparking resistance and nationalism. People began to identify more with their nation, fighting for their own language and culture. Napoleon's conquests brought changes, with the Napoleonic Code introduced in many territories. It abolished feudal privileges and promoted equality, with many reforms outlasting French rule. The wars, despite their horror, acted as a catalyst, accelerating social and political transformations. The disaster in Russia emboldened Napoleon's enemies, forming the Sixth Coalition. Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria and Sweden united to end French dominance. In October 1813, they faced Napoleon at Leipzig. Napoleon was decisively defeated. Forced back into France, Napoleon fought skillfully. Paris fell in March 1814 and Napoleon abdicated. He was exiled to Elba. Napoleon escaped Elba in March 1815. This began the 100 Days. King Louis XIV fled, and Napoleon reclaimed his throne. Europe mobilized for a final showdown. The final battle took place at Waterloo on June 18, 1815. Napoleon faced the Duke of Wellington and Blücher. It was a hard-fought